and welcome. The Georgia Pet Coalition is proud to present a virtual candidate forum and discussion of animal welfare issues with Renee Unterman, GOP candidate for Georgia's 7th Congressional District and Georgia's very own animal champion. My name is Sue Bova. I am a GPC board member, animal advocate, foster and adopter since 2003, and I'm excited to be your host today. We're going to come live from Details Pet Wash and Grooming Salon in Suwanee, Georgia. I'd like to open with a very special thank you to owner Dawn Moser, who is also an animal advocate, foster, and adopter herself. We'll begin today with a 30-minute Zoom forum, followed by a 30-minute Facebook Live event, which includes a special surprise, and Senator Unterman will be meeting doggies inside details, including Gracie, who was rescued in 2019 from the horrific puppy mill in Barron's County, Georgia, where over 700 dogs and puppies were overbred, abused, and living in filth and squalor. Sadly, Georgia has 7 puppy mills listed on the 2020 Horrible 100 list across the U.S. So clearly, we need everyone's help to work towards outlawing puppy mills in Georgia. By electing humane lawmakers, we take a big step in that direction. The Georgia Pet Coalition was founded in 2014 by Cheryl McAuliffe and a small group of animal advocate leaders who were passionate about ensuring companion animals would have a voice at the Georgia State Capitol. GPC is a nonpartisan organization providing informational opportunities for Georgia's companion animal advocates. In 2018, the Georgia Pet Coalition was instrumental in ensuring Senate Bill 418 was stopped. As you may recall, 418 was Petland's attempt at circumventing local ordinances that would allow puppies sourced from puppy mills to be sold in retail stores across Georgia. As a 501c4, GPC engages a full-time professional lobbyist in addition to being fully engaged in grassroots lobbying efforts at the state level. As the united voice for companion animal protection laws at the Georgia State Capitol, GPC's mission is to protect Georgia's companion animals from abuse and neglect through professional and grassroots lobbying for humane laws. After our hour together, please like and follow us on Facebook and visit our website, georgiapets.org, where you'll find a brand new bank of questions that you can use when calling or emailing your state lawmakers or candidates in preparation for the June 9th primary elections and prior to the November 2020 elections. With me today is animal advocate and GPC's professional lobbyist, Andy Lord, who will be our esteemed facilitator. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
Andy is the CEO of Georgia Capital Solutions, an independent lobbying, public relations, and grassroots firm founded in 2006. Georgia Capital Solutions specializes in representing nonprofit organizations with a focus in the areas of appropriations, health law, insurance policy, education policy, consumer rights, and of course, animal welfare. He has worked for the Humane Society of the United States, the ASPCA, and Georgia Pet Coalition on issues ranging from retail pet sales, cost of animal care, anti-tethering, horse racing prohibition, and other related issues in the Georgia legislature. And now, I am honored to introduce our very special guest, Georgia Senator and GOP Congressional candidate, Renee Unterman. Yay! Woo! Renee is a lifelong resident of Gwinnett County and has developed a reputation for being the trusted leader her neighbors can count on. She has represented the 45th District in the Georgia State Senate since 2003 and chairs the Science and Technology Committee. She also served as chairwoman of the Health and Human Services Committee for many years. Renee And Dolly agrees. Dolly agrees. Renee has never been afraid to stand alone as long as she's standing up for what is right. She knows her roots and knows what strong families lead to strong communities. Her neighbors in Gwinnett and Forsyth counties will always be her focus in Washington, D.C. Senator Unterman is and has been a top animal champion for animals at the Georgia Capitol for many years. Here are 5 key highlights of her animal advocacy work. She led the effort to defeat Senate Bill 418, as we mentioned earlier. The bill was proposed by a powerful puppy mill pack that would have stripped local governments of their authority to stop the puppy mill pipeline coming into Georgia through retail sales. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
She passed legislation designating the adoptable dog as the official state dog of Georgia to highlight dog overpopulation, as well as overburdened and underfed shelters in Georgia. She led the effort to create the spay-neuter license plate, benefiting statewide spay-neuter programs. She led the cost of animal care effort to hold accused animal abusers, including owners of dogfighting rings and puppy mills, responsible for the cost of caring for animals seized during the investigation and prosecution of animal cruelty crimes. And today, in 2020, she authored Senate Bill 468, detailing protections for disabled veterans service dogs. And of course, is also a top supporter of Senate Bill 476, which details microchip requirements for pet dealers. And with that, Andy, I'd like to turn the program over to you.
Sue, thank you so much. And I want to thank Details again today for hosting our virtual forum. Again, my name is Andy Lord. I am the lobbyist for the Georgia Pet Coalition. But importantly, I've worked for every major national animal welfare group in the state as the representative at the state capitol. And I want to pick up, Sue, right where you left off, which is I'm very proud to be sitting here next to Senator Renee Unterman, because I can say after all of these years under the Gold Dome, Renee, that I am very clear, as is everybody else, that you are unequivocally the most active, vocal, and most importantly, I think, the most effective voice for animal welfare in the state of Georgia, and have been for years and years and years. So the first thing I just want to ask you is, what led you to this? How did you become such a prominent animal welfare advocate? What led you to this, to taking up the mantle of leadership on this?
Well, thank y'all. Thank you for having me here, Sue. I want to thank you and the Georgia Pet Coalition. I can't tell you how much I appreciate not standing in front of you, but standing with you. But before I even start right now, I want to show y'all who is sitting right here with me. And this is Dolly. I think you can see her. Can you see her?
We're going to make sure that.
Can you see her? There's Dolly. Is that her? Nope. Anyway, Dolly is sitting right here with me, and Dolly is emblematic of many rescue dogs and cats and animals that are in the state of Georgia. And the reason they're so important, and the reason Dolly's here, is because Dolly was the inspiration for the Georgia adoptable dog. And you would think that it would be very easy to get a bill like that through, and that people would be very empathetic. And it wasn't easy. Every bill that comes through the General Assembly is very difficult. And Dolly's bill and the rescue animal bill was just like every other bill. But it is so important, and that's exactly why we did that bill. But you asked me, Andy, what the inspiration was for my love in my spirit and what's in my heart. And it truly is just like every other person who loves animals. You want to take up for animals because they are the voiceless. They have no voice. They're creatures of God, in my opinion. And, you know, if we can't take care of them, what can we take care of? And, you know, I classify dogs and cats and animals just on the same level as children. And children are voiceless. So to me, it's imperative that as legislators and as we're creating laws, that we're looking out for them and making sure they aren't victims. And that's why someone just like Dolly right here is so very important, because she was a victim in a animal shelter and given up for adoption, and I don't know why. She's a beautiful animal, and I think Dolly's about 8 or 9 years old now, and I've known Dolly since she was little. And you know, it's just what we're called to do, I guess. But as legislators, I can tell you, you know, you always have leaders and you have followers. And I've enjoyed being a leader on this particular issue. And I have lots of followers, legislators who say, oh, Renee, just got to take care of it. Renee, just tell me how to vote. And then I got some that don't like my ideas, and I have to kind of convince them. But, you know, it's just a love of animals, and it's in your spirit, it's in your heart, and it comes through. It comes through. Because you have to be passionate. If you're not passionate, you're not going to get anything through, or you're not going to stop anything. And I have to tell you, and I'll quit talking, the Senate Bill 418 was really the highlight of my career in the Georgia State Senate. And that, I was just so passionate about that bill, because Petland had moved into my district. And if you ask me what is the epitome of the abuse of animals, it is puppy mills. And to think that it was in my back door at the Mall of Georgia and I couldn't do anything about it, you know, I was determined. And that was a victory. It wasn't a victory for me, it was a victory for animals, but it was also a victory for the animal advocates, because they work so doggone hard. And I say doggone truly, because they worked hard on that particular bill, and it was a heavy lift. But fortunately, we got it stopped. But you know what? It's not over. Our work is still out there. And when you consider Sue talking about 7 or 8 puppy mills left in the state of Georgia that we actually know about, and there's ones out there that we don't know about, you know, that's what we've got to work on, and that's what we've got to focus on.
Well,
long answer to a short question.
That's okay. You know, I want to Renee talk to you a little bit about, you know, a few years ago, well after you had become Georgia's #1 animal advocate, I began working with one of the major national animal welfare groups as their ambassador, as their lobbyist at the Capitol. And when they first brought me on, I thought, well, this is going to be as easy as it gets. I mean, who opposes animal welfare?
I know, you would think that.
And it's so counterintuitive. Why, you know, I've had a lot of folks ask me, why in the world would an animal protection group even need a lobbyist at the Capitol? So it's very counterintuitive that we all have, most all of us have pets or love animals. Why is it in Georgia that it is sometimes so difficult? You talked about just a moment ago, for example, the battle against Petland, and what a tough fight that was.
Yeah.
Why is it that in Georgia, things like animal welfare are even a tough battle?
Well, it's hard to believe that it is a tough battle, and it really gets into specific interest. And I think it's just a difference in philosophy, and you get into business interest, you get into the different freedoms and regulations and policies around business. And then you get into agriculture and interest in agriculture. But if you ask anybody at the Capitol, do you like animals? Everybody says, oh, yeah, I love animals. But the question where the rubber meets the road is when you're perfecting a bill and you're writing a law and you get into the details. And that is really where the nitty gritty comes in, and where those specific interests start playing into it. And that's where the real battles are. And it's a shame it's that way, But that's why you have to have animal advocacy groups, because Dolly is not at the state capitol unless she comes to visit me. But, you know, they don't have a voice, and they don't vote, and they don't have money. So if you're not looking out for animals, who is going to look out for animals? And that's why it's so important, you know, for people to say, yeah, I love animals, but that's not enough. If you really love animals, you got to be an advocate. And we're blessed to have many in the state of Georgia. We're blessed that they're very knowledgeable, but we need more. We need more.
Well, let's talk some about, you've already touched on one of these points, but so we know that you've been fighting this fight for years. We know that some of the fights have been very tough, but let's review in a little more detail some of your Georgia accomplishments. You already touched on Petland and the puppy mill connection there, and what we're trying to do about those. And as you said, we still have work to do. But it's not just puppy mills that you've been fighting. There have been some fights over local control that are tied with that, but there's also been service animal legislation. There has been cost of animal care legislation with, for example, dogs that may be seized in a pet fighting ring. And suddenly the cost for taking care, if you busted a dog fighting ring, for example, where you confiscated 40 or 50 dogs, previously, animal shelters and local county governments were having to take on those dogs, the veterinarian care, the cost, the food, the uptake. And we were able to pass a law that shifted that back to the owners or the violators who had been arrested for dog fighting. And that was a big step, not only to protect local governments, but to hold accountable these folks that were abusing these animals. And you were a big part of that. So talk a little bit more about the service animals, about the cost of animal care, and about protecting local government.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I always have people ask me, well, how did you dream up that bill? How did you dream up that law? And it didn't just fall out of the sky. And I'll give you a great example this year. I saw a news story on TV, and it was about a veteran who had PTSD. And one of the people, Todd Ream, that many of the advocates know, he came to me, and he had seen it too. And he said, do you understand what's happening? And I'm like, not really. But anyway, this gentleman had PTSD, he's a veteran, and he lost his companion animal, his service animal. So can you imagine, you have your service animal and you have PTSD, and then all of a sudden your animal's gone? Well, do you know your whole world crumbles? And, you know, do you have the wherewithal to go to every adjacent shelter and look for that animal? Well, the question is, if you truly needed that animal and you have PTSD, you're not in very good shape. So it came to us that if we would put a law into place that if you had a companion animal and you were a veteran, that you could register. So I went to the counties, and, you know, there's 159 counties in the state of Georgia. And I said, would this be a burden on the counties? And they said no, that they thought that would be a good idea. So you could register your animal voluntarily if it was a companion animal and you were a veteran. And then if something, God forbid, happened to your dog, you could just automatically call them, and they would already know everything, and it would get rid of all that red tape. You wouldn't have to go to the facility. You know, it just eases the burden, and it seemed more practical. So everybody says, well, how did you come up with that idea? It was on television. It was by somebody saying something. And that's why these advocates are so important, because you go to legislators and you point out problems, because we don't know what the problems are. We're taking care of a zillion problems. But if you really articulate a good issue, then you can make it into a law. And that's exactly like this particular bill, and I just used that one. Petland is a great example. I didn't even know Petland was at the Mall of Georgia until someone pointed it out to me. And I really didn't know their background and their practices. And I won't say best practices, I would say practices of how they operate. And, you know, it's all about education, and it's all about relationships. It's your relationship with the people in power. And how do you take advantage of that to be able to promote things like Dolly?
Yeah. Well, and we have been grateful for that. In the animal welfare community, every time a piece of legislation has been proposed, you have always been the first stop for Senator Unterman. Will
And
you
now
carry this
that's
legislation?
a little problem because you're gonna have to go to Washington D.C.
That's exactly
So
right,
tell
and
me.
that's where I was going next. So, explain to us how your long legacy and success in Georgia in passing state laws and in leading state laws, how is that going to inform you as you now transition from the State House to Congress in D.C.?
Well, that's a good question. And you know, really, the way you tell how a person is going to be a legislator is you look at their history. And I do have a very long history. And you know where I've been, so you know where I'm going. And you know that if I care about animals in Georgia, that of course I'm going to care about animals across the whole United States. And that's one of my goals, is the issues that I care for, whether it's child sex trafficking, it's Alzheimer's, it's autism, all this vast array of issues that I've worked on in the past. That's exactly what I'm taking to Washington, D.C. And the other thing is, it's so important because you bring that base, you bring that knowledge with you. You don't dump off what you got in your brain and not take it to Washington. Every time an advocate has talked to me and educated me about animal issues, I'm taking all of that vast knowledge with me, so I'll already be up to speed. Do I know all of federal law? Absolutely not. But I'll have a jump start and I already have ideas of some of the things that I want to work on. But I'm so glad you brought that up because it is very, very important. The other thing, Washington, D.C., you know, we always call it the swamp. It's very, very complicated. And when you have a person that has experience legislatively, then they always have a leg up.
Indeed. So as you look now towards transitioning to DC,
See, Dolly likes that I'm going.
what is it that the animal advocates, to those out there in this audience and in the animal welfare community across the state, what can we do better to support the efforts that you've helped us so much on and to continue to lead Georgia where we want it to be? You know, we've talked a lot about over the years about how we want Georgia to become the gold standard
Right.
for animal welfare. We want to be the state that other states look to and say, how did they get that done in Georgia? And you're the one that's been able to get us there.
Yeah.
But what is our next step as an animal welfare community in making sure that these efforts continue and that we continue to grow and continue to stay in that gold standard category?
Well, the main thing, and I've talked to Sue about this, and it does give me a little bit of heartburn because, you know, I've had a lot of support in the Georgia State Senate and in the House of Representatives, but you really have to have champions. And you have to have champions that are willing to step out of the box. You can't just say, I care, but it has to be, I care, but I'm going to work. And so it's imperative that the organizations like the Georgia Pet Coalition, you identify those leaders. And they may not be a leader to begin with. You have to bring them along and help make them knowledgeable. But I'm really concerned. We do have a few members in the Senate, but you know, there's always a transitionary period where you have an influx of new legislators. And that is exactly why people like you, Andy, are so important, because you know the incoming classes and the incoming groups, and you have that innate ability to identify these people, and then you convey it to the coalition. But it's a long road because you have to do it very quickly because these people get elected in November. The session starts off in January, and you got to hit the ground running. The other thing is, people, they often think that it's creating new laws. The pet land issue is a great example of stopping a law and saying, we can't tolerate this, we can't have this, and you've got to jump into action. It's not necessarily sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen and writing, it's stopping. And it's harder to stop a bill than it is to write a bill. And people often think, they think that it's very easy to stop something. It's not. It's like a fire. And you got to have a big water hose to put that fire out.
And we learned that firsthand in the Petland fight, for
Exactly.
sure. We learned that up close.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So as we wrap, I want to touch on a point that you made just a moment ago with regard to the incoming new legislators. And as you said, this does cycle through. We have legislators who retire. We have legislators who run for a higher office, or for whatever reason, move on from the legislature. The last two election cycles, we have seen a very large influx of new legislators.
Right.
You mentioned earlier we have 159 counties, but importantly, we have 236 legislators.
Right.
We've got 180 members of our state house and 56 members of our state senate.
Right.
And there has been quite an amount of transition. I think what I would like to leave our audience with a little bit is to say that the last incoming freshman class, as we call them, was quite large.
Right.
This incoming class
Will
is
be
expected to be quite large.
It's going to be extremely
and then,
large.
With you moving on towards DC, we have huge shoes to fill.
You have a void.
You have been our leader.
It's not because of me necessarily, but you do have a void. But, you know, I always think that God has a way, and God looks after animals, and people are going to step up to the plate. But I will tell you, it's a heavy lift, and these organizations are going to have to step up to the plate even bigger and better to be able to fill that void.
Well, that's where I was going. I think that kind of losing our top fighter in the state house, all of us are going to have to step up and do a little more. We're going to have to educate these incoming new legislators. As you've said, we've got to do additional outreach to the existing legislators.
That's right.
To get them to step up to fill the gap that you're leaving. And I'm looking forward to being part of that fight as you transition towards DC. But with that, Sue, I'm going to pitch it back to Sue Bova. Renee, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank Details. Oh my gosh, this place is just fabulous. If you've never been here, and this is in the 7th Congressional District, and I got to give them a shout out. I've never been here before, and it's fabulous.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Thank you.
Senator. Wonderful. Guys, that was a
Dolly.
And thank you, Dolly. That was a great, great conversation. And again, we appreciate everything Senator Unterman has done for animals here in Georgia. So with that, this concludes the first half of our day together. We're going to move inside for our Facebook Live presentation, and we have a couple surprises. So stay with us. Go to Georgia Pet Coalition on Facebook, and we'll be streaming live in just a minute. Take care, and thanks everyone for coming.